I will call to order a special meeting of the Oregon School District electors. It is 6:31 on Monday, February 26, 2018, and we are at the Oregon High School in the Innovation Center. This meeting is for the purposes of authorizing the district to buy and sell property. As electors of the district, they have special powers reserved to them, and those are outlined in state statute, which includes buying and purchasing real estate. This meeting is going to be conducted according to the rules of parliamentary procedure. I have proof that this special meeting has been appropriately noticed pursuant to state statute, and that proof will be with Ms. Wick, the district assistant, at the desk if anyone wants to examine those. The agenda for the meeting is as posted on the screens. There are two items on the agenda for this evening. Before proceeding, I'd like to introduce the members of the Oregon School Board of Education who are present this evening. I'm Steve Zock, the president, and I'll serve as chair for the meeting. Barb Feeney is here as vice president, Krista Flanagan, clerk, Jeff Raymond is treasurer, and Courtney Odorico, Tim LeBrun, and Dan Kraus are members of the meeting. Gina, I'm going to ask if you would serve as parliamentarian, if you'd accept that appointment. Okay, so we'll move to the agenda. There are two items on the agenda, and those are: one, to purchase the real estate pursuant to Wisconsin statutes section 120.082C, 120.105M, and 120.13, 18, and 20 for the Oregon home construction course, and those are for residential lots 88, 89, and 90 in the Oregon Parks Neighborhood Edition in Oregon, Wisconsin. And then the second agenda item is to approve the sale of those lots and new homes constructed upon them once the Oregon High School home construction courses are completed. So those are the agenda items. We'll have a brief presentation on the item by Andy Weiland, followed by questions or comments. Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Steve. So this year we've brought to you, the electorate, the ability or chance, the opportunity to purchase 3 construction lots. We like to buy them in a series of lots if possible when the opportunity presents itself. We had a subdivision that just got plotted, so we were able to talk to the subdivision developer over the last 6 months or so and kind of be able to negotiate some pricing with that. Because we're buying 3 lots, we get a little bit better aggressive pricing, we feel, and then we have that locked up for 3 years, which allows us to kind of plan and work with the school district's construction team to kind of figure out what kind of lots or what kind of homes will fit on those lots. So the lots in question, just so we can orient you today, this is the subdivision. This is the West Side Park. Our school lot is actually down here. This piece of property down in this right-hand corner was actually property that the school district owns for a potential school site down the road. But this is the subdivision, and you can kind of see the roads aren't here. This is through Access Dane, but it's this lot right here, this lot, and then this kind of a little bit larger lot in the corner of this. These lots, as you can see, don't have many trees on them. This is a fairly wooded neighborhood, but our lots don't have them. They adjoin, the backyards kind of adjoin single-family homes, which is preferable from our point of view. We do feel like we can get 3-car garages and ranches, which is something that we typically build. They're great lots for us to kind of work through over the next 3 school years. So we are bringing forward to the constituents the ability to purchase the lots and then sell the lots. That's just kind of a formality so that when at the end of each year when we do basically have the ability to sell the lot after it's been developed, we don't have to have another special meeting in order to do that. We kind of take care of that all tonight if possible.
Do any of the electors... There you go. Feedback. Do any electors have any questions for Andy Weiland regarding the purchase of the lots or the sale of the lots? Yep. Courtney Odorico.
Andy, is the intention that these would be used in the 2018-2019 school years?
So one per each year, so it'd be 2018, 19,
starting this year.
19, 20, 2021.
Because I see from the graphic that you've displayed that there is no road there yet. Is that
There actually,
slated to go in soon?
there actually is a road there, and the utilities are all there. It's just this picture is from Access Dane.
Oh, okay.
So it's from 2017.
Oh, okay. So the road's in.
Yep.
The infrastructure's all in.
Everything's ready to go.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You bet. The only thing that's not there is sidewalk, and they'll be putting that in the spring.
Are there any other questions of Mr. Wyland? Ms. Flanagan?
With the developer, are we mandated to build a certain type of home or a certain price range of a home?
Trying to recall the covenants. I don't think there's any really, there probably is, and I'd have to go look at them. There's probably some architectural restrictions as to what you can build. I don't know that there's any limitation on price. It's just kind of, I mean, we could go with cheaper materials to lower the price a little bit, but we've kind of found our niche where we are building the homes. I guess if you could go a little bit further, what you're trying to get to.
We've just had some initial conversations in terms of affordable housing and homes that are built in this community, and potentially this being an opportunity for the home construction team to help with that. And so I think further discussions need to be had on that, but that's an intriguing idea.
Yeah, the only issue that we have with that is these lots are not the cheapest lots that are out there, and so they kind of lend themselves to more of the higher end homes, but that would be something we could discuss.
Any other questions of Mr. Wyland? Sir Kraus?
My name is Dan Kraus. I live at 460 Landover Drive in the Village of Oregon. What are the prices for these lots?
So the two lots, I'll try to use the cursor here. This lot, which is I believe 88 and 89, are 96,000 each, and this one is 100,000, the corner lot. That's the negotiated prices that we have. They were a little bit more than that was offered for sale. I can speak a little bit to that concept. We have been limited to try to stay in the Village of Oregon simply because we don't want our kids driving outside of the city limits or village limits if at all possible. So we've always tried to stay here. There are not a lot of lots available for sale right now. We looked for quite a while in order to find these lots, and it was just because the subdivision just developed that they became available.
Mr. LeBrun?
So there's a new subdivision going in out off by near Foxborough, and do you have any idea what the prices of those lots are going to be?
I have not even, well, I think I've seen a plot from maybe years ago, but I don't think they have it even platted yet. I saw preliminary plat when they originally were talking about it. That was a decade ago, but I don't know what the current concepts are. We did have a village meeting today, and it sounds like that is going to happen. I don't know that they would be ready to purchase or build upon next fall.
Just from what I've heard, those seem to be more first-time home buyer homes as opposed to this property, which is very likely at least a second-time home buyer home.
Yeah, I believe you're correct.
Any other questions? Okay, is there anyone want to make any comments for or against the proposed purchase or sale of these lots? Mr. Kraus?
I just want to take this opportunity to move the special meeting of the electors to purchase the following real estate according to the Wisconsin statutes for the Oregon home construction course, residential lots 88, 89, and 90 in the Oregon Parks Neighborhood Edition subdivision in Oregon, Wisconsin.
That motion is on the screen. That would need a second from one of the electors in the district, and Mr. LeBrun makes the second. Is there any communication or discussion regarding that? We'll do a voice vote, and those who can vote are those who are electors in the district, and that would be residents of the district who are of voting age. Okay, and the motion is on the screen. It's to approve the purchase of the real estate in Parks neighborhood as shown on the screen. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is approved. And then if we could move up, there's a second motion that is being sought, and that's the approval to sell the lots once the construction's done. That's again on the screen, and I need a motion for that.
I'll move approval of the district to sell the lots that we just approved in the motion prior.
And with motion according to what's on the screen in that verbiage, Krista? Okay. So Ms. Flanagan makes the motion. Mr. Kraus makes the second. Is there any discussion from the electors? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. And so the electors have approved the purchase of those lots and the sale of them upon construction or completion of the construction. And you need a motion to adjourn the special meeting of the Oregon District electors. Mr. Raymond with the motion, is there a second? Mr. Kraus with the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The special meeting of the Oregon electors is adjourned at 6:43. Thanks, everyone. We'll now turn to the regular meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. I'll call that to order at 6:43. Take a roll call of the board, Ms. Wick.
Ms. Feeney? Present. Ms. Oderico? Here. Ms. Flanagan? Here. Mr. Raymond? Here. Mr. Kraus?
Yo.
Mr. LeBrun?
Here.
Mr. Zock?
Here, board has a quorum. I have seen proof of notice of meeting. That is with Ms. Wick again and available for inspection with her. The agenda is as posted. We will take up again board authorizing the purchase and sale of those lots. We have a work session on student growth and population task force report, a 5-year budget plan. One thing that
We're going to kick that one forward.
the budget plan, we're kicking that off to the next meeting, or, yep. And then we're also kicking the executive session off because I didn't have time to complete the written evaluation for our review, but that will be done by the next meeting. I'm partway through it. So with those changes, I need approval of the agenda as posted. Mr. Raymond with the motion, is there a second? Ms. Feeney with the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. That takes us to agenda item A, which is the consent calendar. Is there any item on the consent calendar that any board member wishes to remove? I note that we have a couple additional retirements I think in the materials that you were provided, we have Kay Bleefernick and Cindy Eddy, but we have 3 more. Cindy Ellisted, Gerald Raymond, and Chris Cedar have all submitted their letters indicating that they're going to be retiring from the district, and so those will be included in the packet. And they're online. Also included are a number of donations, 3 of which are from the Draper family, Irene, Carla, and Dwayne Draper. Their father and husband was Manley Draper, who was a longtime school board member in the district, and they've donated just short of $800 for the Draper family scholarship. Peter Ulrich has donated $100 to the OMS band. The Oregon Community Bank has donated $1,000 for the RCI fundraiser, and Steve and Becky Noel have donated $400 to the Oregon Splash Pad. And so the consent calendar would be to formally accept those donations for which the district is grateful. So I would entertain, with respect to the 5 folks who are retiring, they all have been longtime employees of the district and really dedicated to our students. We hate to see them go, but we are going to wish them well in retirement, and we, of course, are going to have our annual retirement party And we'll get notice out to you guys about the date of that in the future, where their service to the district will be celebrated.
The consent calendar?
Is there a second? Second. Motion and a second. All those in favor signify, well, let's take a roll call since we have resignations.
Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Ms. Oderico?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Raymond? Mr. Zock?
Yes, motion carries by unanimous vote of the board. That takes us to communication from the public pursuant to Board Policy 180.04. The board has established an opportunity for the public to address the board. Is, Janie, anybody registered with you? Anybody wish to register or speak to the board this evening? Okay. Yep.
I guess, yeah.
You do?
I would.
Come on up. If you would take a seat at the table, join us. Okay, and your name and where do you live?
My name's Dan Klingeman. I live right down the street here at 325 North Perry Parkway.
Great, thanks, Dan. And the board has an opportunity to hear from our constituents during board meetings, and so this is your opportunity to talk to us. Under state open meetings laws, we have limited opportunity to respond back, but we
Sure.
listen pretty well.
No problem.
And I know you've talked to Dr. Bustler as well. So
I have.
Floor is yours.
I've been corresponding with Mr. Pliner on concerns, after what's happened in Florida and many other places with school shootings, and just all around concerns for safety and how people are allowed into the school. And after talking to Mr. Bustler, he said that everybody's been talked to again about policy on how people are admitted into the school. And I think rational thinking parents would be okay getting slightly inconvenienced getting into the school and being able to see their kids at night than opposed to just allowing anybody into the school, and because anything could happen. And it scares the crap out of me. I've got 2 kids in the school and certainly want to see them grow up and move on with their lives. And unfortunately, that's not happening in a lot of schools because of tragedies. So I think just reiterating the safety protocol on how people are allowed into all these schools is very, very, very important.
Great. Yeah. Thanks. That was part of our referendum. For a long time, we've been looking at secure entrances, and that was a fundamental core of our referendum, is to make safe and secure entrances to our school for all of our kids. And I've seen your correspondence. Thank you for bringing your concerns to the attention of Mr. Pliner and Dr. Bustler, and for the communications that you've had with them. I know all of us are saddened by what's happened and concerned for the safety of our students. So everyone's trying their best around here, and I know that they've reviewed the critical incident protocol here, and both as an administrative team and with staff as well. So
Sure.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. It's your first board meeting, right?
It is.
Well, I hope you stick around and watch us for a while.
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address the board? Seeing none, we'll move to item C, informational items, OEA report, and I don't see anyone from the OEA this evening. So we will move on to student report. Hi, Ellen. Okay, the floor is yours.
I have quite a few things to talk about tonight. So tomorrow is the statewide ACT for the juniors. So that means I don't have school tomorrow. Last week was FFA week, so they did a variety of things, including making breakfast for the staff. Winter sports are winding down. We had 2 sports with state competitors in swimming and wrestling. The girls' basketball season ended on Friday they had a good season, and the boys' basketball team has a game tomorrow in Monroe, and it's a regional matchup, so first one. So they're starting their competition or whatever it is. And then there was also a play last week. They've been working on it for a while, Taming of the Shrew. It went very well. I heard it was very good. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it. There was a performance during the school day, and there was a few over the weekend. I don't know if anybody saw it. So, and then also last week, there's a lot going on. There was a teach-in designed to support the victims of the shooting in Parkland, Florida, and it was also to foster dialogue about school safety. It was held during both lunch hours, and roughly 200 students participated. While I didn't participate, I do know that the conversations were very civil and respectful. They found common ground despite of various opinions. Many students actually stayed after and continued to have conversations that were very respectful. So I'm proud of my classmates and students in our high school for organizing this event and having such a difficult conversation in a respectful manner. I think that's great to see. It's a good thing for our school that we are able to address these issues in a safe and respectful way. So, yeah. And then Courtney Orderico came into our student council meeting last week, Thursday, and presented the various plans for new schools and growth in our community. So I had them fill out just kind of a brief sheet about what they liked and didn't like about each plan, the reasons behind each of those, and I compiled all of them into one document, and so I would love to meet with Dr. Bergstrom to go over that sometime, and then potentially present to you guys when we've gone over all of it.
That'd be good. Courtney, thank you for meeting. I wanted to bet you had a great time talking to them. Good. And that would be great if you could meet Dr. Bergstrom, if you'd meet with Ellen and kind of go through the data and then report, both of you can report back to us. We're going to be talking more about that plan and talking about what we want to hear. So, good.
It was really interesting to hear all of the students' input while I was reading through them and compiling them over the weekend. It was cool to see like the reasonings, like some of the reasonings that I or anybody else might not have come up with. Just being able to get more people's opinions, I think, will really help with the decision making.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Okay. That takes us to item D, action items, and this is board's formal action on the purchase and sale of the lots in the Oregon Parks Neighborhood Edition. Andy, real briefly, the floor is yours.
So this is just basically now the Board of Education has, as Steve said, the ability to purchase these properties at, and I put the prices in there. It also allows the business manager to sell the properties. That way I don't have to necessarily come back to you when we're negotiating purchase price and those types of things. That has worked very well, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
And this has been a process that we've used in the past.
Correct.
For similar purchases and sales. Any questions, Mr. LeBrun?
Andy, do we typically have those homes sold before we start, or at least before we finish?
Not before we start, ever. Before we finish is a little bit of a hodgepodge, and it depends on the kind of the climate, the business climate, the home purchasing climate. I would say in the last several years we have. We like to start advertising them actually right about now, just so that if we can get somebody to purchase the house, we can then work with colors and those types of things, and maybe if they want some different fixtures, that type of thing. The only thing we have to be a little careful of is sometimes people's tastes are a little bit different than most people would like, and so depending on how that all plays out, we may change the earnest money, so that we have the ability to kind of change things. That actually happened this last year, as we did have some people back out of the purchase kind of last minute, and we had to kind of work through some changes and that they had asked for. So most typically we are selling the house before the end of the school year. but it's always kind of dependent a little bit on the market.
And is all of the work done by the students, or just certain portions of it, and the rest are hired in plumbers and
Yeah.
electricians and?
You just hit on a couple of them that we have to have licensed folks that do that, and the house comes with a warranty. So it does come from a warranty for those trades. We do most of the carpentry, and then what happens is those trades come in, they work with our students. Our students might do some of the work, but it's always under the supervision of those skilled tradespeople. We don't do roofs just because of the safety issue associated with that. And then, like you said, HVAC, so plumbing and electrical, we have other folks do that. And then also some of the basement work, the concrete, we actually put the basement in before school starts. So we kind of have something to start with.
Just one last question. All the subs that we use, we typically draw from the district?
We try real hard to work with local contractors here, and there might even be some rotation that Chris does with that, just to, if people are interested, as long as we've had good experiences, we kind of work through the different people. We do have some providers that we stay with each year, but we try to rotate as many as we can. Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, I'd seek a motion to authorize the business manager to purchase lots 88, 89, and 90 in the Oregon Parks Neighborhood Edition in Oregon for a total price of $292,000 plus closing costs, and then the board authorized the district business manager to sell those improved lots once they are completed as detailed above. Seeking a motion in that respect. Mr. Raymond with the motion. Is there a second? Mr. LeBrun with the second. Any discussion? Mr. Kraus?
Yeah, I love doing this every year because I get to tell everyone that I grew up in one of these houses that was built by students in the Baraboo School District back in the 70s and 80s, and we moved in when it was brand new. And my son just last year finished the building trades program here in the Oregon School District, and he is now working as an electrician's helper and applying for an apprenticeship in the electrical trades. So it's a great program. My family is really supportive. We've seen the results of the work that students can do. I haven't actually lived in an Oregon School District built house. I'm sure it's very super. I saw the one that they were working on last year, and so I'm fully supportive of this motion.
Any other discussion? I'd just like to add, I echo Chris's comments, is that we're going to continue the discussion as a board about affordable housing in the district, and discussing ways in which we as a district can enhance the increase in housing that's affordable to folks in there, including how we might be able to get the school program, construction program involved in that. All right, Ms. Wick, would you call the roll on the question, which is to approve the purchase and the sale?
Mr. Raymond? Mr. Zock?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Andy, you've got the authority to purchase and to sell.
Thank you.
And tell Chris congratulations. He's got 3 years of work ahead of him. All right, that takes us to discussion items. Letter E, committee reports from policy. Krista?
We have not had a meeting since the last board meeting, so I have nothing to report.
Jeff, Vision Steering Committee.
We met last Wednesday, the 21st, to discuss possible transportation changes. Folks may or may not know that we've been discussing potential transportation changes for over a year now to address some issues, including getting 7 to 12th graders a little more time to sleep in the morning, trying to reduce the amount of time that students spend at school before the first bell, and also trying to make the school day more flexible for students who may want to come in early or leave late. It was decided last Wednesday that we're not going to make any major changes for this coming fall. In a future VSC meeting, Andy will come back with thoughts about how we could possibly reduce the wait times that kids are spending at school in the morning before the first bell. But that would be the only change for next fall. And the other thing I have to mention is the Path Forward project, previously known as the Apollo project. It's the implementation of the position paper. Steve and Brian and I met Dr. Rickabaugh last Thursday for lunch to talk about the third phase of the project. And for those of you that need a refresher, phase one was last spring, which was focus groups. Jim spoke with many staff members and board members. Phase two was the book review and discussion and activities at the end of, one meeting was at the end of November and one was at the beginning of December. And Brian and Jim have taken that information and they've been figuring out how to move forward with phase three. And they shared their thoughts with Steve and I. And I think we have consensus on what to do over the next 3 months or so. And first phase is going to be, the first thing to be done will be A-team getting back together with Dr. Rickabaugh and reviewing where we're at and how to re-engage the school leadership teams once again. And I don't know if Dr. Bussler has any further comments on that subject.
My superintendent report gets shorter and shorter. That should make all of you happy. A couple of really quick comments. One of the things that Dr. Rickabaugh heard when he did the phase one focus groups was school leadership teams would like to have more experiences with each other and learn from one another. So part of the plan that we've put together, which we'll be reviewing with A-team in 2 weeks, is getting together in possibly May, June, and or July so we can close out this year in terms of what did we learn from the activities that we had in our annual report, and then gearing up for next year's annual report, which will be back in front of you in October of 2019. 2018, 18-19 school year. So we felt we had great progress. Jim and I did a little work offline and then brought Steve and Jeff up to date last Thursday, and we have a high level of consensus on our path forward. Jim and I might make a few tweaks between now and when we get the board and leadership teams back together based on feedback that we get from the administrative team on March, I think it's the 11th. So we're excited about the project, and it's been, in my estimation, a really good project for us. And very few school districts can say their boards of education have sat down with almost 90 leadership team members from all of their schools and had conversations about student achievement and improving education in their district. So I'm very proud of that for you. You should be very proud of that too.
Just one final comment on that. It was a really good meeting with Dr. Rickabaugh and Jeff and Brian. The waitress kept circling our table to take our order, and we kept shooing her away because we were embroiled in conversation about how to move it forward. We talked specifically about two areas with how will we know that we're successful with this, okay, and kind of those, what are we looking for, and two, moving talk to action, because we've been talking about this for a long time. So I'm really pleased with where we're at, and we'll get more detail out to you as we move forward. But it was a terrific meeting. I'm really comfortable with where we're at, and we might rename it from the Apollo Project to the Raymond Project once you step down, but we were not going to tell you that. Or unless you want to keep it the Apollo Project. With that, we needed to call it something, so we thought we'd call it that. No, it was a terrific, we met for about an hour and a half talking about specific, how do we get this moving, so. Oh, that's right, we have a policy, sorry, Jeff, we can't. Yeah, that's right, yeah. Anyway, okay. Anything else from Vision Steering? Okay, that takes us to the primary agenda item tonight, and that is to start working on the report that the board received from the long-range facilities, or the Growth and Population Task Force on Long-Range Facilities. We've got, if people don't have the report, we've got some extras here. Brian, and this is meant to be in the form of a work session. We wanted to hold it out here so that we're on camera, but it's important that we work as a work session. I'm not necessarily going to have to call on you and be formal in that sense. We want to have a talk through it. Brian and I have walked through kind of a process by which to start engaging conversations. As with last time, I'd like to bring Troy into the loop if there are no objections to have him at the table, since in all likelihood he's going to be joining us in April, barring something really weird. So seeing no objections, Troy, you come in and grab at that table, and you should feel free to participate, okay, as we go through. So, and then I'm going to pass out. Courtney, can you shoot these down your way? Sure. And these, did everybody get one of these?
Do you have another one, Brian? 'Cause I have like 100
I've got a. So the goal of this was to start our conversation through a decision-making process and take questions that we need to answer one step at a time, and not necessarily answer them this evening, but just to see where the board is at and what information is involved in reaching that decision. Do we have that information, and what information we might need, okay? So if any time people say, no, I think we ought to have this question in this arena, just let me know as we walk through it. But the first question that Brian and I put up there is, do we need to build? And I think Brian's handing out the chart that we got on enrollment from the task force, and do we need to build? And so again, to reflect, just to summarize the enrollment, can we get this up on the screen then so that the audience knows what we're looking at? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we need to, it's the enrollment projection. I thought we had that ready to go. Anywhere, Brian? No.
Leslie, do you have this on your computer?
Can you show me where?
The additional.
Or can you send it to Andy?
We'll get it up. So the floor is open about, do we need to build? So the first question that we want to process, do we need to build? Flowing out of that is, when do we need to? Where are we going to have the pinch points? If we're going to have that based on the timing, what does that mean regarding referendum and when we have to go out? We've got a timeline that we're going to show you when that, and then we're going to do a little exercise on, what factors are important to us, each individual board member, so we can start processing which options we're steering toward, okay? So first of all, do we need to build? What are folks' thought in terms of the data that we've got?
Well, trusting what the task force and our experts have found out, I don't see a way around building, because we just don't have enough room for our students coming up as soon as 2 years from now. Unless we did something fairly radical, and we haven't talked about this, like kicking all of our incoming open enrollment students out, which I don't even know whether that is an option legally for us to do. So I really think we've got to build as long as we can trust the numbers here, and I have confidence that we can.
Just jump in.
Okay.
I don't need to.
Secondly, I think it's going to come fast and furious. It is not an incremental, we're not looking at this slow incremental growth that we've seen over the last 8 years. It's been very relatively slow over the last 8 years, and suddenly with the new subdivision that we looked at, the subdivision that was just approved on the southeast side of town, and certainly the subdivision that has been approved for Fitchburg, it is not going to be what I would consider a paced growth. It's going to happen very, very quickly. And so if we do get caught behind the 8 ball, it is going to happen quickly and to an enormous extent.
There, and we just got the projection up on the screen. Brian, you told me, like, we had data from the January, third Friday in January in terms of our enrollment. Can you share that with the board? Because that impacts, I think, the discussion as well.
You've seen this report before, but there's one thing that's significantly different. Look at the third column, where it says February 2018. In the Mark Roffers report, Mark had January 2017, and then he jumped to 2020, 2021. As we were getting prepared for tonight's meeting, we thought this is a really important piece of insight for you. We inserted February 2018, and that reflects, we now have our student enrollment counts complete. You'll recall our revenue cap, or our school budget, is based on the September enrollment count. Then in January, we do a second enrollment count through the district, and that's used for state aid purposes. To me, the important piece is you'll notice there's been an increase in students, and an increase in around 100 students since January 2017. To me, and as we looked at this administratively, we thought it's important to note, to let the board know that the trend has already started. We're already seeing increased enrollment, which isn't a surprise, because when school districts do construction projects, often new families and community members will move into their district. So I'm not going to say we're ahead of schedule, but we're right on track. And I know if my dear friend Carrie Majeski responded, she would say she's not in yellow, she's in red right now. Did I say that right, Carrie? Okay, she has trained me so well. And again, we have some variation in terms of building capacity based on class sizes and based on facilities. The Brooklyn building, the Brooklyn Elementary School building capacity is likely right around that $500 or 500 student mark. And you'll recall with the 2014 referendum, we added 3 classrooms. So had we not added those classrooms in 2014, we would be 75 to almost 100 students over capacity right now. So that's the distinction. It looks like that trend has already started, and we wanted to provide you with the update.
Relevant thing and a question I've got is, why did we not foresee this, or why was this not addressed in the last referendum? So I think it's important to point out that the task force worked with our architects to do capacity studies of the current buildings. And what we did do in the last referendum was expand the high school. And as you'll see here, we are really not looking at a space crunch in the high school because of what we did in the last referendum in terms of additional building or build outs. But the other schools really don't have the capacity for expansion. And so I think that is a critical point in why we're looking to build, because the capacity isn't there like it was in the high school for some of the other schools.
That's a really good point, Krista. And a companion to that is, remember in the 2014 referendum, we were catching up on some facility space. And as an example, we we didn't have music facilities at Brooklyn. The general music class was in a former grade room classroom. We also renovated some special education spaces that were very, very small, but our net increase was an additional 3 classrooms at Brooklyn.
Well, and we also have to take care of our existing buildings, and that referendum went to taking care of those so that they're maintained, and so we don't have to, as we're growing, we don't have to also at the same time throw additional monies into those buildings, and we built significant capacity at the high school on top of that, which is a large part of that project, so.
Yeah, I saw that as a concern as well, answering the question, well, did we waste a lot of money there a couple of years ago when we could have been doing this type of planning? And I don't think so, because now this is all from my memory, but out of 54 million that we spent, some 30 plus million was on athletic and PE facilities, and none of those are out of date or over capacity at this point. The referendum, though it was district-wide, did focus on the high school and to a secondary extent on the middle school, where we also added a lot of classroom space. So I don't think that we're asking to redo anything that we've already done. Most of the money that we spent over the last couple of years in that referendum, like I say, went to modernizing, improving, and making a lot of our PE and sports facilities state-of-the-art as well.
Anybody else with any comments about when, or do we need to? I mean, for me, it seems pretty evident at some point we're going to have to build, given these numbers, and, you know, I sat through the presentations with Mr. Roffers and looked through a study in detail, and it's inescapable that the area is going to grow. And the fact that we're up 100 and the big areas of potential growth haven't even started should be a signal to us about how popular the area is. So, Troy?
Yeah. I'll jump in here. Thanks for allowing me to participate in this session. It's been something that's really been on my mind as I'm preparing myself to hopefully join the board here in a couple months. I would just like to echo a couple of points that have already been made. Totally agree with Mr. LeBrun's point about the growth and how quickly it's going to arrive. I think it's coming up all around us, and so it seems like it's really going to happen very, very quickly. So very much agree with that point, and certainly agree with the need to build. I've had the opportunity to speak with constituents lately, as I'm preparing myself for this position, and would again echo what Dr. Bussler said about the existing space, that we're really kind of constrained already, especially in the elementary schools and RCI. That's where I've heard talk about crowding and issues where some of our class sizes are above where we'd like them to be. So again, just another one of the pressures with the growth. And then I guess to the point about the previous referendum, agree with everything that's been said. And I what I was hearing as part of my participation in the task force is that our existing schools, especially at the lower level, are really at a size that we want them to be, and that we don't really want them to be larger. We've heard from principals where they like to be in a school that's an appropriate size, where they get to know students by name and on a first name basis, and are able to really develop those relationships. And I think that's especially important in today's world with a previous topic at this meeting in some of what's been going on in Florida and other parts of the country. And I think it's just very important that we keep our schools at a manageable size so that our educators can really foster those personal connections.
Anybody have any disagreement that we're going to have to build in the district? Okay, that was kind of the easy preliminary question. And then when do we need to build and at what level? Again, the chart that's there reflects we're going to have a real pinch point at elementary through the intermediate levels and middle school levels, starting as early as 2020, 21, and then for sure in 2025 to 2026. So any additional thoughts on that? Okay. I don't, yeah, Courtney.
Andy, would you just sort of, for everyone's benefit, walk us through the process in terms of how long it takes to develop plans once you go to referendum?
We got a slide for that.
Oh, I'm jumping ahead. All right, never mind.
There. Because when do we need to build? I think the chart is a pretty good indication where our pinch points are going to be and when they're going to happen. So, Brian, do you have the?
Leslie, did you send Andy?
Yeah. No, it's the Findorff-Bray chart.
You sent it. I think I might be able to pull it up here too.
Pardon? As soon as you get it, yeah. Because what we're going to get you is Bray and Findorff did a chart as to when, if we were going to build in 2020 and have a school open for the beginning of the school year in 2020, what the time frame looks like, the building process, the design process, and that would take us out to referendum at that, when we would have to make a decision on referendum.
Looks like this. You can. I just shot it to you. There you go.
There, okay. And Brian, do you want to walk through this with the board?
Sure. If you look at, there are 4 columns. It's 2018, 2019, 2020. When you get to the last colored comment, the last item says occupancy, and to my eye it looks like royal blue. Everyone see where I'm pointing? The royal blue is August 2020. What we ask Bray Architects to prepare for us is this schedule based on A, a November referendum that's successful, B, you will notice that the design starts a bit before the referendum so that we can take advantage of doing some design work over the summer, because if we don't do the design work prior to the referendum, we will not be able to bid on time. You go down from, they broke down a couple of different bid packages, and you'll recall last time out in the market, if you can bid in that January, February range, it's likely your best bid market. So they've accomplished that. We start construction in May of 2019, and it's likely a 13-month construction cycle. And that 13-month construction cycle would allow us to move in August of 2020.
Now, are we assuming building one building that's going to house approximately 600 people or students?
Plus or minus, yes. It's a freestanding building, so one of the dimensions that's taken off of the schedule that was in our previous schedules with the 2014 referendum. Recall, we were building around students. And it takes longer when we're building and remodeling a school that has students in it. So this would be a freestanding building on a new site. And that sprays Beth's projection in terms of a timeline that's reasonable, but also fast-paced.
And if we did 2 buildings at one time, because some of the options have us building 2 buildings at once, you could layer a second building on top of this same schedule and open 2 buildings in fall of 2020.
Correct.
Okay.
And this assumes that we want to have a building ready and open beginning in the 2020 school year, that we would need to go out for referendum in November of this year to meet that type of phasing of design, bid, and construction then. Right, Brian?
Yes.
So what happens if we don't go out in November? Let's say we wait until April of 2019.
Basically, it would push everything back by 6 months if we went in April. And instead of having the building completed in July, August of 2020, the building would be completed in December, January of 2021. And sometimes that works. I've been involved in a couple of projects where the school district was closing a school and then making a mid-year move. And follow me on this. You're closing a school with the same grades, and you move into a new school second semester in January. We are not going to have that option. So it would be super complicated to move students from schools that they're already attending for a mid-year option. Likely, I would assume you would say that's an option that we're not going to go down, and it would really push it back to opening the school in August of 2021, if you follow my logical thinking approach. So at 6, if we went April, we'd likely be opening the school August of 21. If we went with the third option of a referendum in November of 2020, we would be opening a school in August of 2022.
Yeah, so essentially like a 5-month, what?
Did I say November? I meant
November of 20.
yes. November of 19, there is not a general election. So,
It depends on state
Yeah.
law and what they're
Yeah.
doing.
Is that right?
Yes,
They're-
There's nothing on the ballot.
correct.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Yeah, but the delay then, if I'm seeing the schedules right, if we don't go in November for a referendum for construction, and choose to go in April, that 5-month gap or delay will cost us a year in opening a school. And the question is, where are folks on that in terms of their thinking? You know, when we go, this is just a discussion item, we're talking out loud right now, it doesn't commit us to anything. We're not on an action item, but we just sort of want to, if we're going to move ahead, we sort of got to get a temperature check on pace. Okay? Barb?
So my question would be, would delaying until April happen because we didn't feel like we would be ready to present all the information to the public? Is that why we're even talking about April as a possibility?
There are a lot of reasons why you might say April, potentially. You say, well, we can make it another year in terms of enrollment. I mean, that's why we postured the first 2 questions the way we did is, you know, do we need to build, when do we need to build, and at what level? How's it critical? Because that drives when we go out to do it. I don't know that with these numbers, this is my view, I don't know that we can wait till 21 unless we are going to do some temporary housing of students and overcrowding in some areas, and just wait for a year on that and see if it really happens. I mean, there's part of that thinking, is it really going to happen sort of thing, and do we wait till it's really dire till we go out? Or do we plan ahead,
Right.
beat the curve, knowing that we've got the data, and, if the axioms hold true, if you build earlier, sooner,
Right.
it's going to cost less.
Right.
Either
Well,
way.
the last two referendums, we chose November because higher turnout, and that's generally favorable. If a referendum were to pass in November, for example, how much time do we have before we must start building to use the money in the approved time frame? That's an Andy question, I guess.
Depends when it depends when you sell the bonds, right? Because that's what triggers the 3 years.
Right. So you have 3 years to basically sell the money, depending on the interest in environment and those types of things. So it depends on when we would sell the bond. So we have some control over that. Not on the early side, but when we would wait till.
So would that mean we could potentially delay the tax impact if we felt that we could get away with waiting another year to actually construct? Or would we need to start, the tax impact would be felt right away?
I think the way they have it structured right now, and talking to Michelle, it would be felt right away. But if you didn't have to build because everything slowed down or something like that, we could delay the impact. It just depends on when we sell the bonds.
Well, you could do that anyway. If we're going to build right away, we can structure the financing so that we back end it, so that when the growth happens, it impacts the new growth and is funded from new growth as opposed to current taxpayers. We can structure that amortization schedule a lot of ways to deal with that. Brian, go.
I may not have been clear, so I'll try to be clear on what I believe the board's options are. It's November 2018 for a referendum, April 2019 because that's a general election. Our understanding of state law, which is still a little fuzzy, we don't think we have an option in November 2019. So then we would kick out to April 2020 or November 2020. Part of the theory of recent Oregon school boards has been, how do we get the maximum amount of community participation? I can tell you based on research that we've done, if we were to go into April, we would likely have, April typically has an election, a total elector vote of somewhere between 2,000 and maybe a high of 6, again, and that high of 6 would really, we don't get too many 6,000 votes. If we go November at a gubernatorial or a presidential, we are likely looking at 11 to 13,000 votes. So on that standard of how do we make sure and get the most constituent representation, we have pushed for a November referendum. It also helps position the construction a little bit better, because if we do some prep work on design, we could we could be in the market in a late January, early February bid. And what we learned last time, remember, we delayed the high school project, and to Dan's point, 31 million plus or minus was the amount that we spent at the high school out of the 54. And at one time, we were looking to get in the ground in October, when we really didn't get in the ground until, Andy, the following March, because we delayed it for better construction timing. So we have some flexibility, you have some flexibility with that. Andy will be working with Michelle, I think everyone knows Michelle Weiberg from PMA, because they're going to try to time the sale at the best interest rate place, because remember last time, I have to brag for a second, Andy and Michelle and the timing that the board had set up, we reduced the real cost to taxpayers by about $12 million because of timing the market in a good way. And sometimes that's luck, sometimes that's timing, But either way, it's $12 million that this board and future boards will never have to levy to the community.
So,
Go ahead, Dan.
so from what I know about the markets and the interest rate markets, it's not expected to go down or even stay where it's at. The sooner the better as far as borrowing money for the foreseeable future, is what I see on this. Also, the sooner we get started with construction, of course, the sooner we can get the kids in there, and the sooner everything can settle out. The downside of going in November is maybe it's too early as far as the community is concerned. Now, what I mean by that is there's a lot of education that goes into knowing what the school district is needing, and I think we've started to get the word out that people hopefully are starting to hear the fact that our schools are getting close to their capacity. The newspaper has reported on that. We've been talking about it here at the school board now for a few months, and so we've started the outreach to the community in that way. But I think it's important for us to, as we've done in past referenda, if we want to shoot for a November referendum, that we need to start having listening sessions, start having public events where we ask people to come and we go through all of this stuff with our expert explainer, Dr. Bustler, and those of us who will also want to be involved in that, because the way that I see it, all signs point to as soon as we can do this, except for perhaps the public opinion and where we're going to end up in a referendum. Because if we come out on the bottom side of this referendum, I think we may have to just turn around and try to do it again the next time we have an opportunity. Otherwise, what can we do? We're going to have people learning in closets or other places in the district. So as soon as we can, I see, at least from everything that we've talked about, that we need to do it in November.
In terms of board formal action to authorize a referendum, are we talking May then, if we're going to go in November? No,
Well,
August?
Yeah, the last date the board could decide is around August 20th. One of the challenges with waiting until August is it doesn't give us an opportunity to, we would be slightly in scramble mode to get everything put together, to communicate to parents during that September and October window. An advantage, and I've shared with a few board members that have asked, so I want to make sure that I've shared it with everyone. An advantage, if the board could make a determination in May, we could then be sharing information with parents before the end of the school year, so as the 17-18 school year comes to a close, parents have a sense for what they're looking at, and we can work throughout the summer, and we can also work on the design throughout the summer because we know what we're designing at that point, and that links up with a better start to get us to that September, or to get us to that August 2020 school opening. But of course, we can make just about anything work, but it would be a lot better on our operational end if we knew in May.
To me, we've been on this course before. We've looked at these options, and when we took this course, when it went out in a November time frame, it gave us the benefit of timing the market better, giving us adequate time for design and construction. It gave us 2 summers to do construction rather than doing it over the winter. This one gives us a benefit of opening a year earlier, and we're obviously not going to be if we build a school, we'll have some capacity, but that's capacity that we're going to need room to grow in the future. And it gives us plenty of time to engage the public if we decide to go in November. I'm just real hesitant to wait until April, given the growth that we have and the time that we're going to need to build and design a school. I don't want to wait till 2021, given the numbers that I see. But anybody else have any thoughts? I mean, we're not going to make any decision on where to go, but are people in a different place in November this year? With it, I've seen a.
I think if we've made a decision to go November,
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just, board consensus is, given the report and the numbers we're going to have to build, got the pinch levels are pretty evident on the enrollment data that we've got, and most folks are inclined to look at November as we move forward in the process and get feedback. Accurate, kind of?
My only comment on that would be yes, unless we find out that the village is going to go forward with a library referendum. And then maybe we need to talk a little more. I think that's been back and forth, right?
There has been some conversation on that, but to my knowledge, there is no plan to have a referendum for the library because, in case everyone doesn't know this, I will provide a full disclosure to the camera as well. I happen to be the library board president, and we are now, our biggest priority in the next 4 months is hiring a new library director. We likely will not have a new library director on board until June 1st. And that's the best case scenario. We have done virtually no comprehensive planning for the library spaces. So with our director coming on June 1st, I don't know how we could have everything put together in order to bring a plan on a referendum. Because you'll recall, this isn't supposed to be a finance lesson, but the Village of Oregon has estimated a $6 million commitment to the library. That $6 million plus any fundraising that the library, the greater library community is able to do, that's really what will likely make up the proceeds to design the building. So the library or the village is not required to go to a referendum on the library either. But I don't see that happening in November. But remember, I am one of 7.
Okay.
So I just have a question on that, Brian. So it was my understanding, and I think I heard you say that if the village wanted to do the library and get the money for the library, they would not have to go to referendum. That would just be a way for the library board to know whether the community supported that outlay. So they've got a different power than we do. We're not able to actually levy the money for the new school unless the referendum allows us. The village is in a different position. The village can levy the money for the library without a referendum, but they might choose to use a referendum anyway, just if they want to get feedback.
You are absolutely correct. Municipal governments have greater access with capital funds than school boards. School boards could only do a capital project one of 2 ways. A, you could pay for it out of your current operations, which I don't know how you would do that, because we pay for teachers and school supplies and electricity out of current operations, or B, as Mr. Kraus mentioned, by a referendum approval.
Okay, I think the board's thinking alike in terms of building and timing of stuff. So now we get into assessing what we need to build and where we need to build it. And the task force report to us had done a prioritization study and had put some dots. When Brian and I were talking about the goal evaluation, this page sort of assessment, and they had looked at a number of factors in terms of evaluating each option. So Brian and I hate doing the dot thing, but I really do hate the dot thing. I've been to so many of these things where we do dots, but when Brian and I were, everybody's got them. Yeah, everybody's got that. That's in there. Everybody's got the report. We're good. Yeah, we're good. Thanks. But I thought we would do just check where we're at as a board in terms of what priorities are. Okay, so we put over on this board, we put the factors that were evaluated by the task force. And what we would like to do is have you pick 5 of those and put a dot on them. Okay? And if there are other factors that we should have there, let us know. But we thought we'd see which ones are most important in the board's eyes. So we'll take those, the ones with the most dots, and we'll take those and move them to another screen, and then we'll rank those to see where the board's at and that, and just to see how we sift and winnow those. Okay? To tell us whether or not that adds anything to where we're going. And so those are the costs. We've got the costs of the various options are in the report.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
When you're talking about cost, you're talking about the cost to go to referendum, because we have not seen operational costs.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, it's the actual just, the cost of the building stuff. It's the dollars that were put in. I mean, are you going to look at selecting the option that is the least costly to the taxpayers? If that's really important to you, then you put a dot on it, okay? For school size, that gets back to, we've talked a little bit about the middle school issue. I mean, do we want to, is school size important? Do we see want a school building that's 1,000 if we have to add on to keep a 7/8 configuration? Is school size important to you in the consideration? Is location going to be important to you? Grade configuration, how important is that? The number of transitions that students make, is that going to be determinative in terms of how you as a board member assess the options for you? Jeff? If you look at an option, and there are some options that have a 6, 7, and 8, and some that have maintained the 5, 6, 7, 8. If you think that element, or moving to another one,
If you think grade configuration is an important
factor for you.
Either way.
We put that in, and then we're going to have further conversation on that factor. Remember, we're also going to be getting feedback after this meeting. One of the things that we wanted to steer away from is the board saying, the board likes option 4 before we go out to feedback time. But we do want to start coalescing as a board in identifying what's important to us. And that may, by implication, say look at the factors that we pointed to here, looks like option 27 is in play more than option 46. But without getting there, we want to just see where people are thinking in terms of these options. And then once we figure out which 5 are important with the most folks, we're going to just rank them, do a second dot thing, just to see where people are at in factors. And wherever that leads us, it leads us. But it's worth having that conversation.
So, just explain what you think flexibility means, the ability for buildings to change grade configuration?
That, or it gives us the most flexibility in the long term past 2030, So, for example, there was some commentary from the task force that, if we build on to keep the 5, 6, 7, 8, and we expand the middle school, and that begins built, and we grow after 2030, is that sort of, that's
From our conversations earlier, I understood that flexibility, and what I think of it is between now and 2025, because we had talked about the 1B/3.
Yep.
And that gives us the flexibility to either stay with 1B or go on to the 3. And that's That's the flexibility that I think is important, because we don't know what's going to happen between now and 2025.
I think
and if
that's
we
right.
can shift, because we've chosen one, but
Yep.
whereas if we choose 1A, that's going to lock us in for the medium term through 2025 and probably past.
Yep, that's another area where flexibility is relevant in that.
I also wanted to say that the cost thing, while it's important to me, splits into two, because you can build a building for a low cost, but it's going to cost you a lot in the long run if you put in cheap materials and if you don't put in energy efficiency. So it's no surprise to anybody that hopefully that in the end I'm going to want to see a sustainable school with a lot of energy efficiency in
Shocked.
and perhaps even creating its own energy, I'm hoping. So I would go for a high value on long-term costs being low, with a low value on short-term costs being low. Because if we spend more now, we're going to save our constituents more in the long run. And we have the ability right now, by borrowing money, to stretch out the cost of the more efficient schools. So
So
to me,
costs
where-
could be short-term or long-term.
could be short-term or long-term, and those two can conflict.
On the transportation, are you meaning the student's experience in terms of how much time they're spending on the bus, or what does that mean?
Yes. It can mean whatever you want it to mean. I mean, if it's a relevant factor to you, it becomes relevant, and then we have discussion about, okay, how does that play into the options? So where these may impact different areas, when they become, if they are identified as important, then we'll talk, why would that be important? How does that impact how we view options 1, 2, 3, and 4 before us? Okay.
And then one more question on the uniform experience. It seems like one of the options, experience would not be uniform in the short term, but in the longer term. So are we going to look at this as like a long-term view versus the short term?
However you want to.
Just a quick comment and reminder, whenever we do sort of I'll call this a sorting process, and the value will be, once we look at where things have been sorted, we'll see if there is consensus around certain areas. And it doesn't mean that whatever you identify tonight as your sorting process, that isn't fixed in concrete. It just gives you an opportunity to step back, look at it, and then part two, as Steve mentioned, is to take whatever our top 5, there may be a top 6, and then prioritize those. So you as a board start to get a flavor from one another. Here's what the board as a whole sees as a sorted out group, and what the board as a whole sees as a prioritized group from the top items. So remember, this is an organic process and intended to be so.
Yeah, and it's meant to stimulate exactly the sort of questions that you ask. But we need to get that started and on the board, and as much as I hate doing the dots, it seemed to be the easiest way to get it started, right? Did I? Okay.
He mentioned that a couple of
I was
times
just
to me
hoping.
over the years,
Yeah.
too.
Okay, so 5 dots
Yes.
on those. And is there any other criteria that people wanted on there? And we've tried to hit them all that.
Well, can you put 5 on 1? What's the rules on this?
No, it's 1-on-1.
You have to put 5 dots on 5 different things? or
Correct.
Just
Yeah,
take,
because then you're going to rank, then you get to prioritize once we get the 5. Okay, so you'll get what? We'll see. Yeah, okay. So
Do it, come on, people, we can do
this
it.
is 5 dots, 1 on each. We're doing it. Go, dot away.
Dot, dot, dot.
I gave Troy dots, too.
Troy gets dots.
You don't get dots.
You're a non-dot. member of the board.
I'm very exciting colors.
We'll get your feedback.
Well, there's no power rating exercise.
No, you still got till April, so.
No more data exercises in the next 6 weeks.
Not meant to be hard.
Andy, when everyone's done, you can call them up and give me the top five.
Okay.
Or six, however. When you're done, call them up.
One seven, which is school science, three sixes, education, greater integration, and flexibility. We go to a five.
See, I did that for students.
I read all of them. All I would say 95%.
Flexibility.
Then five is
Transportation.
what's the next?
That's, I actually.
You go all the way down to a which is uniform experience.
I would say we have the top five.
Okay.
Because the next job, next
There's
drop
a
down
rank.
is the uniform experience.
I just, that was like,
Okay, good.
I like left a spot.
Now it's
And
three.
that.
Yeah. Which got, oh, now we use,
Yep.
we'll make orange number one, green number two, yellow number three.
You want a power rank?
Yeah, do you, don't you?
Nope, I would just leave them.
Just leave it like this?
Yep.
I thought we were gonna power rank it.
Nope. Nope.
Okay. Okay, so the board's top five are school size, which had 7, location was 6, grade configuration was 6, flexibility was 6 as well, and transportation, which was 5. So, any reaction to that? Yeah, but
I think, I just want people probably to know that just because cost didn't rank in the top 5 of priorities in the decision making doesn't mean we're not concerned about costs, keeping costs appropriate, and that sort of thing. You could draw that conclusion, but I don't think that's the right conclusion to draw from that.
I'll agree with that. I initially did put my dot on cost, and then I thought the costs are so similar that it wasn't a factor.
remember, as it relates to cost, the cost data that you have in the report, what Bray Architects did was provided a similar type facility with a similar level of costs and addressing the sustainability issues that they know are close to the heart of our board. So when they gave estimates for cost in the details, it wasn't a low-cost option, it wasn't a high-cost option, it was a commensurate cost option with what we did in 2014 and to include some sustainability features.
I just have one thing. I put my dot on when students first come together, and it's kind of a follow-up to what we talked about in Courtney's presentation, where the students indicated that they didn't want to first come together at 9th grade. And right now, all of our students come together at 5th grade. And I think one thing that we may not think about, but came up in that, and I heard it from my own daughter, is about friendships. That right now in our district, if you're not in the same elementary school as a friend, you know you're going to get to have that friend in school with you at 5th grade. And so as we look to this piece, you may not come together with that friend in school until you're a freshman. So not that it would weigh people, I think, but that's an interesting point.
And it's part of the reason we did this, knowing that we're going to have feedback loops. And Brian said this is an organic process. And then Ellen and I have talked a little bit. That is a factor for students is when you come together. So we're going to have further discussion on that as we get more feedback and bring more into this loop. So I'm going to echo the same thing on cost. Cost obviously is a factor in the board's consideration as to where what we do and what we select, but the costs are pretty similar. It just depends on whether it's immediate or delayed 5 years in building and sort of stuff. So while that's a factor in terms of choosing the option, I think for most of us it wasn't determinative because they're so similar, if that's a fair characterization of it. Any reactions to this from anybody in terms of what they're seeing, in terms of the options that are before us? And that kind of gets into our number 5 is what do you see as the pros and cons from each of the options? This is the time to kind of weigh in as it relates to the top 5 of what this board has said. So the floor is open. For me, I put a dot on school size because I think one of the determinative issues is what we do at the middle school level and whether we retain a 7-8 building, because that means we're going to be big if we do that, and the options of down the road become limited. So for me, flexibility in school side tied directly into what grade configuration we have, and that will be really important in my thinking.
I think just considering those things, they're very broad categories and they're all very important. I wonder whether we spent enough time talking about other possibilities than the 4 that we have on the table, or actually 5.
I think that was in terms of were there more than 4?
Right.
I just think we've asked that of the task force a couple times, that you guys looked at least 12 and 15 of them and distilled them down. So
what I want to point out, can you turn it off here?
I'm sorry.
Is that this could give us a real opportunity to make a jump towards something that's maybe something that we've been talking about for many years, instead of looking at how can we make more schools like the schools that we have right now, which is basically what we're talking about, is how can we make more schools like the schools we have right now. Your idea, Steve, which we flushed out into our the position paper in 2014, 15, was it 15?
16.
16. Okay, so the years flow together for me. Started out with the name the One Room Schoolhouse, with the idea that schooling has changed in a way that almost brings us full circle to having all grades together in one classroom. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's something that we want to do, but it is a way of thinking about things in a global way that can help our students or our families that would want to pursue individualized education on a year-round calendar, at least in part of our district, so that I think we would be remiss if we didn't have a conversation in the school board about whether is that something, now that we've got this opportunity. It's a crisis, but it's also an opportunity where we're all talking about the fact that we do need another school quickly. To think about, do we want to try to make that school that we had talked about, the one that goes through the summer and has different breaks, the one where each student can choose their own path, and that you can have fourth graders and eighth graders learning in environments that are close by to each other, mentoring each other, and having coaches instead of the classroom teacher at the front with grades segregated as we have. I think I would like to take a step back and just have some conversations about this. Because while it is something that we really do need to do to make more room for the students that are going to be in our schools, and in the end, we may decide just to create another school like the schools that we have, only newer. But I think that we should talk about all of the aims that we talked about when we did our 2016 paper and see if we can make them come together sooner and better in a different facility, which we have the opportunity to create right now.
Can I just add?
Yeah. When Steve said that the task force fleshed out 12, 15 ideas, one of the things we did talk about at different times during the course of the year was that concept of, do we want to look outside the box? Do we want to think about a different way of doing school, building schools? And it was the consensus, and Leslie, you can confirm this for me, was the consensus of the task force that wasn't the role of the task force, it wasn't the charge to the task force, that was a better discussion for the board to have. So while it was discussed sort of in the big picture, ultimately it didn't come as an idea or a path to the board because it was kind of determined that the task force wasn't the appropriate committee in which to make that decision. Does that sound right, Leslie? Yes. Okay.
I'll just bop back to the report from Jeff and Brian on the Vision Steering Committee, where meeting with Jim Rickable. I think the intent is to drive the Path Forward paper and those concepts for everybody in the district and not segregate that to a building. You're really talking about like a standalone charter school, which is a separate, different conversation than this. But I think in terms of the educational goals of the paper, that applies regardless of what building we build, because it applies to all of our students and not just a limited number of students. That's at least where I'm driving this from. So unless you want to begin a charter school conversation, which was outside the task force realm, not one that I want to walk into right now, but it's if the board wants to talk about it, we can.
That was where my thought process went to, is back to what we're studying with Rickabaugh, that really that would be educational change based on structure instead of self and strategy, which is kind of what you're saying, Steve, is that you look at levers and what's most impactful for students. It's what we're doing in the classroom, and it's not determined by what building they're in or how long they're going to school. That's an important factor, but the biggest levers are working on the things that we're talking about with the leadership teams and Jim Rickabaugh.
And I was, when we were first thinking about buildings, and I wasn't on the task force, but I was thinking like K-8 would be a really cool building to have, and that was on the table but didn't make the cut. And so I talked to Leslie and Courtney about that and the rationale for why, in terms of a educational facility, a K-8 as a single building wasn't as desirable as doing something along like one of these. And actually it made some sense to me, even though I was initially enamored with a K-8 type of building. I think we can drive the path forward into a configuration that's represented in paths 1 through 4. And I'm not sure if we go the charter route that solves the crowding situation. Because if you're going to go a charter route to solve the crowding, it's really going to have to be a K-8 to deal with that over a period of time. Just thinking out loud, Dan. But I get what you're saying, because I was there too, and kind of moved back into a realm of, building what is a traditional building, but changing the way we work within it is probably the way that's best to go.
So one thing that I heard from the task force members just now, which is interesting and I think worth repeating, is that the only reason that they didn't look further into these types of configurations or possibilities is because the board did not ask them to. It wasn't their position to think about what way could we change the way that we deliver instruction. It's a whole different thing. Right. So the task force didn't look at that, and to their credit, I mean, they would have been kind of going off the rails if they had come back to us and said, hey, we think you should go with the charter school. Then I think we would be a little struck by why they might have suggested that, which is why now, sometimes you put the cart before the horse, and then you have to pull it back around and say, is this really what we want? And that's the conversation that I want to have. And maybe the answer is, yes, one of these 4 is really what we want. But I don't think that we had that conversation before we asked the task force what was going to happen with our population, because that's what they were answering. What's going to happen with our population? What we need to answer as a board is, how are we going to think about this? And are we going to go with something where we just build another school? Or are we going to say, this also gives us an opportunity that will work with our exploding population, and we could give people a choice to try a different type of education within our district. And I understand what you're saying, Krista, about it doesn't matter what kind of building you have, it's the instruction. Well, it does. I mean, the facilities matters. The facilities matter, but it should not be the first thing. The first thing is what our idea is about how we want kids to learn, and that will shape the facility. So it's our idea about how we want kids to learn and whether we want to give kids in this district a choice of going to a year-round school. Maybe that won't work. I don't know. Because if we give people a choice to go to the year-round school, we might have 3 families that want to do that, and now we've got a whole school dedicated to that, and we've still got overcrowding at every other school. That could be a problem. I don't know whether that's a problem. But it's something I want to talk about. And that's another reason that I'm concerned with the possibility of going to November. I think we should go to November referendum if we possibly can. But the community is going to want to weigh in on this. I want to have more conversation about our concept outside of just how can we make more room.
Well, I thought that that's what the Apollo project is all about. It's how we make that kind of experience universal in all of our schools. And, you know, I have a concern about having a charter school that offers a different, presumably better kind of experience, because we should be seeking to have all our kids have the optimal experience, no matter what building they're in.
I wouldn't say better, it's just different. Everybody learns different, and some kids do better in a military type school, some kids do better in a Montessori type school, some kids do better in a year-round school, some kids want summers off. I'm not saying that we want to look for one school that's the best that we can think of and the rest of them kind of go their own way and we don't care that much. I'm just saying maybe some people could choose a different configuration, whether it be based around the school year, whether it be based around more open concept of mixing of grades or something like that. I'm not an expert on education. I try to keep up with what people present here to the school board, and it's fascinating to me. But I taught for a couple of years in a very primitive school. Anything that we can offer these kids in our district is going to be good. I have no doubt. I just want to see what else can we dream up and maybe throw it aside once we've done that. But it's the process of making plans, like Mr. Pleiner's told us. Let's think about what we really want to do and then make the plan instead of saying what's coming at us and how can we avert it? How can we put out this fire? Why don't we say, let's think a little broader for a minute.
Any reactions on the 4 paths that the committee has identified in terms of our priorities up there? Or what do you see as pros and cons from the options relative to the top 5?
I like the flexibility of 4, the 1B/3, just because it gives us a chance to pivot.
I totally agree. I think there's a fair amount of uncertainty, a growing uncertainty. I think the more flexibility we can build in, the better. And it allows us to pace the impact to the community at the same time. So.
I would go, at this point, I'm most interested in 3 and 4 because of the second middle school, and I'm very concerned about locking ourselves into a large middle school.
I like the final, I'm sorry, go ahead. I like the final configuration in 3 personally best. We've got 3 schools that kids will go to within the district. In the end, the size of the school gradually gets bigger, and each step as kids are maturing and they're able to maybe understand or deal with more kids around them, And then the high school, of course, is the biggest. But I think, the stuff that I've thought about so far, I like Path 4, but starting out with 1B and then give us a chance to stay with 1B or move to Path 4 at that point.
If you look at school size got 7, that means that all of us but one thought that that was important for us. And I'm assuming if I read that, if I interpret that right, that means that there was concern about the middle school driving. If people have different thoughts about why school size was important, other than the middle school having concern about that. We've articulated that if we just keep it a 7-8, we're going to be at 900 to 1,000 by 2030, and we didn't like that, is what I'm reading into that.
I
Is
think
that
that's
accurate?
really curious based on who is reacting to that. Students, staff, parents, us. I think it'll be interesting to hear how big of a factor that is or isn't when we talk with people.
Right, and I'm just I just was articulating, you're agreeing with me that for us, there's a concern about the 7-8 building and the size of that, and the flexibility, the fact that flexibility is there is important in that.
I would just add that, we sort of, with a couple of these paths, assume that we can expand the middle school to absorb 1,000 kids, and in its current iteration, it would not absorb 1,000 kids. We would have to do some additions to the middle school, and that may or may not be a possibility. So we do need to keep that in mind.
I would just join the chorus. My preferences are paths 3 and 4, with ultimately K through 5, 2 middle school, 6 through 8, and then the high school.
I think one of the other interesting things is if something rises to the top as a concern, so we keep talking about size, and students have a concern about not coming together before 9th grade, are there things that we can also do in the curriculum or outside of to address concerns that maybe don't become a concern based on what we choose? Can we do other things to alleviate that concern?
Well, we could talk about making a campus with 2 middle schools somewhere.
Get some feedback on it. It's interesting to me that location is important and transportation, which is related to that, is important. Either one of those really don't have a direct applicability, I don't know, to which of the paths we choose, unless people see that differently. You see that those are separate issues. One would be what lot we pick, depending on where we build and that, so that those two are separate from. Then you've got flexibility, grade configuration, and school size, which seem to play into 1 versus 2 or 3 versus 4, right? If we look at that. Okay. Troy.
A question, and it kind of goes to the location discussion. Paths 3 and 4, they both have RCI being converted to a K-5 building. I'm curious if the task force talked about RCI being converted to a middle school instead of a K-5, and what structural elements would have to be added to RCI to make it a middle school. And I'm asking that question just because of the location question about where future schools would be built, and perhaps another middle school within Oregon proper might make more sense to some people.
That's a great question, and I think it's feasible. However, there would be considerable cost because right now RCI doesn't have science rooms per se. They would have to have classrooms fitted to be similar to what we offer at the middle school, which would also mean the STEAM component because we'd want to look at programmatic equality and allowing kids an opportunity to access at RCI what they are able to access at the middle school. So in addition to creating some of the classrooms as science rooms and adding in the STEAM piece would be the greenhouse, additional PE facilities. It could happen. It would just take some renovation. So it wasn't something that we thought about very much.
That site was also difficult, the way the building's constructed, for us to figure out how to add on to it. So that's one of the reasons why we kind of excluded that as an option to look at.
That and it was originally designed to convert into back to a K4, K5 when we were moving forward, so. Okay. All right, I think we've got pretty good information from tonight's session in terms of where to go. We're going to get more feedback. Is there any additional information you need from what you have right now? You're putting aside the feedback that we're going to get. Is there any information that you don't have that you need?
I guess I also go to the operational question. Are there any options that when we look at operationally adding admin or teachers, that there's one that's more cost prohibitive than the other actually after we build that has an impact on our school district annual budget, if that makes sense?
Anybody else? Okay. How about as we move forward, Brian is going to have a meeting tomorrow, I think, or Wednesday? Wednesday with folks about feedback loops. Is there any kind of suggestions or advice to give them from a board standpoint in terms of what we see in terms of feedback as they develop that plan to get us information, or what our steps forward are?
Very similar questions. So I think providing any feedback that we have might steer one way or the other. I think just having the exact same discussion with those feedback loops.
Everybody do dots? We're going to make everyone do dots? Yeah.
Only to satisfy you.
Okay, I think so. But is this type of exercise that you think worthwhile in putting up the factors there, reviewing that and getting their perspective on what values? It's sort of like our values conversation, and then also pros and cons of the various paths. Okay, because we're going to reach out and get your information, Ellen, from the students, but we've got leadership teams. We've talked to the OEA group about having conversation with them. We're going to need to develop a plan to bring the community in some form or another, to get feedback from the community, and how you design that and plan that, I think, is for your meeting on Wednesday.
Yeah, whether we do that with focus groups, small identifiable focus groups, because we can't do it in a town hall meeting with 100 people. We have to do small groups. We could also do some survey work potentially on factors that may help the board. A conversation that Steve and I've had so far is you can expect over the next several months till we get to May that we'll have a work session at the board meeting, and a work session like this. And if there's something you want us to explore or us to administratively present, we're happy to do that. We just have to know about it a little bit ahead of time. So tonight's is really a kicking off of the task force is handed off to the board, and you have accepted their report, and now you're processing through the report, and likely, Courtney's probably smiling, processing through some of the very same questions that the task force processed through over a 12-month period, except we are in a shorter time frame than a 12-month period to get us to May. So there are no silly questions. There are no silly requests for information. Just keep them coming to Steve and to me, and we will get us queued up for our meeting on March, I want to say 11th, whatever the 12th. Thank you. We're not changing the board meeting date.
So our path forward from our session tonight, sort of the takeaways is that there's consensus of the board of the need to build that that will likely have to be accomplished by 2020, that November looks to be the most feasible at this point in times of options as to when to go to referendum. None of this stuff is set in stone, but it's our current thinking as we proceed to get feedback, and that we've identified factors of school size, grade configuration, and flexibility as important for us in evaluating the options that are before us. And we're continuing to work, Brian and Courtney, on the location and transportation component, that is the lots that might be available for this. And so we'll report out on that. There's been some developments today that we'll share, confidentially with you at another point in time, but positive. So we're working on that, and on Wednesday, Brian and the group are going to work on a feedback plan along the lines of going out to groups and soliciting this sort of feedback. And will report back to us in terms of what they're thinking in that regard. And then we'll be reporting and talking about this regularly now for the next couple months and go forward, knowing that we'd probably want to shoot for making a decision in May if we're going to go to referendum.
So am I to understand that no one else is interested in talking about anything beyond these 4 plans? Because if no one else is, then I don't, that's fine. I would just like to be able to get some feedback from people who have done this, or maybe we could look at other districts that have done some pilot programs or charter schools. It's not something that we've talked about seriously, though we've mentioned it before. If the train's already coming at us and we can't turn it, we're stuck with these 4, which are very good plans. I don't mean to say that we've got bad options here. We've got very good options. It's just that this board got this when there were only 4 options. And we did not give any feedback to the task force before they came back to us with these 4 options. All we said was, tell us how many people we're going to have in the school and what do you think we can do. And they did a great job. I think we didn't give them enough guidance, or we didn't give their feedback early enough as to the population growth, and they went forward with building projections. And I think it could have been a little fast. So does anybody else want to talk about that?
Say, I am satisfied with these options, but at some future point when this board has time, I would like to have a discussion about summer school and what our options are to potentially use that time for students to take additional coursework and have it operate more like a year-round school, but optional for students who want that.
For me, Dan, the Vision Committee has met a number of times with the task force, and board members were there, and there was never an expression that maybe we ought to explore this. And so I didn't do that because I'm comfortable with the fact that we're on a really dedicated path through the Visioning Committee and the Path Forward work and the work with Rickabaugh to address the very issues that you're talking about, but uniformly with our students. And I'd rather go that way than do a charter school and isolate a different programming for different students. So that's why I heard them say, we explored a lot of different things, including the K-8 one that I was initially looking at, and I'm satisfied with where we're at, and they did exactly what I thought they should be doing, else I would have voiced something different earlier on with it. And that's in large part because we are doing the programming thing in a different context. But that's not to say, Dan, when we approved when the voters approved the $55 million referendum, then it got into design work, and we turned it into our school folks to design the buildings to meet the programming that they were going to do for the next 15, 20 years. And so that's, I think, going to be the exact process we use in the future. So if there's something new in terms of how we configure schools and set them up, and they'll do that in the design phase. So I guess I'm really comfortable with where we're at. But your question's a good one. I'd answered it in my own mind earlier. Okay. By the silence of it, I think folks are pretty comfortable with it as well. So, good discussion, folks. We're on a good path forward with moving toward addressing the issues raised by the task force, and May's going to come pretty fast, so we've got work to do. That takes us to the next item on our agenda, which is superintendent's report. And Brian, you said that we've eliminated a lot of stuff, right?
Yes, we have. Couple of quick reminders. First, since the last time we met, I know everyone's familiar with the Parkland, Florida incident. We sent information home to all families the day after the tragedy in Parkland, Florida. Again, the focus on that was to provide parents with some information from the National Association of School Psychologists. Every time there's been a significant school violence incident, we have, within a day or two, sent something out to our parents if they're getting questions at home or if they're looking for resources. In addition, we provided a safety update to all families and guardians. That was a follow-up to one of our special A-team meetings when we reviewed our crisis plan and our training. We also met with the Oregon PD and Oregon Fire Department, mostly because of some incidents right here in the village of Oregon. We intend to get together with the Brooklyn Police Department, which is a gentleman who happens to live in the same subdivision that I do, and we coached baseball together years ago, so I know him well, and we're going to get together with the Brooklyn Fire Department, and I'm sure most of you know Brooklyn has its own fire department, so Carrie and I will be doing that hopefully by the end of this week. And then today, also on the school staff training issue, today was a professional development day, and all principals in all schools spent some time dialoguing with faculty about school safety and about crisis planning and about our plans for some updated training. I think I shared with you via the weekly letter, but just to let you know, Andy is our point person on school safety issues, so he's leading a group of administrators following our A-team meeting to update our language and to make sure that our language that we use in our school crisis plan is consistent across the district and also consistent with the municipalities that are serving us. Well, sure.
Given that our district includes how many municipalities, 11, 13? Mm-hmm. Would it be wise to coordinate those crisis plans with all of the police and fire departments within all of those municipalities, including City of Fitchburg, Town of Dunn? Given the event, God forbid, if something enormous happening, and assuming you would have resource response from all the communities that are served.
Yeah, we learned something really interesting that I didn't know until our fire chief was talking about. They have a consortium, McFarland, Stoughton, Oregon, Monona Grove. He didn't mention Fitchburg. I'm not, but he may have and it's just escaped me. They do a lot of training together, and they said in the event that we had an incident, those would be the first calls. I'm guessing because Fitchburg is close, Fitchburg would be in it as well. So we want to we cast it in that kind of narrowly first, but I think we continue to do that so that everyone is well versed in terms of our schools, because you never know when we would need a response. And in fact, the day we had the fire at the high school, albeit a small fire, we had response from the Village of Oregon, the Brooklyn Fire Department, and the Fitchburg Fire Department. So that's a good point, and we continue to work on that. I'm going to jump to my next item, which is Village of Oregon. Andy and I think most of you know, we periodically meet every other month with the Village of Oregon, and today we met with them on school-related issues. There is a movement on affordable housing in the Village of Oregon, and we learned that there's a meeting coming up, and they said there were several of our board members that are invited to that meeting, so I was delighted to hear that. We also shared information because Steve shared with me over the last month, is there a possibility, asking the question, would there be a possibility for us to maybe make affordable housing part of our school construction program? And some of you might remember several years ago, likely within the last 8 or so, we built a school construction project with Habitat for Humanity. So it was a very successful program and came at a time when we were having difficulty selling some of our regular residential homes. So that is a real possibility. Another item we learned about today, and actually I knew about it before, but gathered a little additional information. The village is looking at updating J.C. Park West in a significant sort of way, and also contemplating the addition of a position for park and recreation. So we had a good conversation about that, and to the extent that we could partner with them, whether we made a contribution if they ran the position, and we saw that as something within our community education program. They also said they're looking for an alternative student member for the park board, so we will be in touch with Mr. Pleiner to see if we can identify a student for the park board for them. And then lastly, I will send it out in this week's update. Mike Grace, City or Village Administrator, provided us with a new update to development projects in the Village of Oregon. I found it a really helpful summary, and for example, they identify right where we just purchased, there it is, Oregon Parks Neighborhood Edition. There's 24 single-family homes and 12 two-family homes. And then the largest plat, it's called the Highlands of Netherwood. And that's a property that's between CC and Netherwood Road. It's 76 acres with 149 single-family homes. So I know this information is important to everyone, and I will make sure and we will get that out to you. Last week, I'm sure you read the distinguished column in the Oregon Observer. Oh, I was the author of that distinguished column. It was an opportunity where they had an opening, and I thought, I'm going to take advantage of this opening to put information out on Student Population and Growth Task Force. Again, it's sort of that drip theory of constantly keeping information in front of the community. I think that takes care of it, because in one way or another, everything else on my list has been mentioned. There are a lot of great activities going on in the district, so stay tuned. We're moving to the month of March in 2 days, and spring is very busy throughout the school district. So I'll stop and see if you have any questions for me.
No questions. That takes us to future agenda and closing, and Janie's distributed the draft agenda for our March 12th meeting, which includes A and B per normal. For the information items, we'll have to add the 5-year budget plan. That will be a report out then, add that. We anticipate some action items from policy, Krista, it looks like, and then coming from Andy, 2018, 2019 capital projects as well for then. And then we'll update you on the Student Growth and Population Task Force. We may not have a formal work session, but maybe an update in terms of where we're at and reporting at that point in time. And then we will do our closed session to wrap up Brian's evaluation. So if anybody has anything else that they'd like to add to the agenda, let Brian or me know. That takes us to checkout. And Ellen, anything from you? Fun night, wasn't it? Okay. Barb, Tim, Krista, Courtney, Jeff, everybody wants to go home. Dan?
I'm going to keep you here for a minute. The Oregon Middle School had a wonderful orchestra concert this last week, and I was in attendance, and we got all kinds of music there, some classical stuff, some stuff from Harry Potter. There was some rock and roll on the strings. Lots of strings, lots of kids learning stringed instruments. It's amazing, really, the amount of participation in the middle school. I didn't count the kids, but there are a lot. It looked like a full orchestra up there in the new space, which was very nice. Also, over the weekend, I was at a gymnastics meet for all ages, but I was there for a middle school aged person, and I saw one of our school administrators there with her school-age person, and we had a short conversation about how there's no opportunities in Oregon for gymnastics for boys or girls of the age that our particular people are interested in, which is middle school and intermediate school type. So. But it was fun, and people from Oregon are participating in Madison and Stoughton and other clubs around. That's all.
Good, thanks, Dan. In my continuing report on fiction and reading fiction, as I reported last time, I just finished A Gentleman from Moscow, or Gentleman in Moscow, which is an amazingly great novel. So read it. It's really good. Anybody read it? It was on the bestseller list last year. It's phenomenal. It was one of the best books of last year. So it's outstanding. I spent some late nights as I was racing through the last 100 pages. So other than that, I don't have anything other than to entertain one more motion. Ms. Feeney? Mr. LeBrun with the second? Just like we're at an auction. I'm going to have to start discerning what you guys are saying. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed. We're adjourned at 8:48. Thanks, everyone.